Hey everyone, before we start, I just want to announce that the channel is now sponsored by Main Gear PCs. My link is in the description if you're in the market for a new computer. Very much looking forward to working with them going into the future. The new PC that they built me is looking super dope, and I will show it off as soon as it shows up. I'm probably going to be doing some kind of a PC giveaway in the near future, so hop into my streams, twitch.tv/Datto, at some point in June for a little more information on that. All right, enjoy the video. Season 23, Season of the Wish, has finally come to a close. And today, the day before the final shape, I'm going to really try to remember everything that happened to recap for all of you. The story of Season of the Wish is that we've kind of resummoned Riven, her spirit, because we are basically out of options. Savathun kind of pointed us in the correct direction with the wish wall code that we discovered on her wings. That was a big, part of last season. We need Riven to grant us access to inside the Traveler because we can't get in. Of course, she wants something in return, and that is the return of her clutch, her Ahamkara eggs that still happen to exist so that the Ahamkara can, exist again because they were hunted to essentially extinction a long time ago by the Vanguard. The eggs are in the ley lines, which are like the bridges between different realities, and we need to scoop them out as they pass through. Mara and Riven absolutely do not trust each other, and there is a lot of tension over the course of the story. Riven initially believing that Mara was behind hiding the Ahamkara eggs. Week over week, we find more and more of her brood, and over time, we learn a bit more about Riven and her relationship with another Ahamkara, Taranis, which my World of Warcraft ass brain kept thinking was Tanaris. Taranis sort of gave Riven a different perspective on what it's like to be an Ahamkara, as Taranis wasn't this necessarily conniving, mischievous Ahamkara, how they grant wishes. It's part of the whole star-crossed exotic mission that we got this season. Taranis is also the one who ended up scattering the eggs to save them, but did so with a wish. And if you, as an Ahamkara, make a wish for yourself, it can be lethal, and in this case, it was. In the end, both sides keep their ends of the deal. A portal to the Pale Heart of the Traveler is revealed, and Crow jumps inside to establish a connection with Mara so that we can go through in the final shape, however we end up doing that. As usual, I am not the best critic of story, plot, narrative elements. The weeks where we had something actually going on, I was usually pretty entertained. It does not take a lot for me to be entertained when it comes to this kind of stuff. I like Marasav. I like her plot lines. Having Riven around as an actual character I thought was pretty neat. Ahamkara hatching and coming back could end up being a future plot point down the road somewhere. That could be kind of interesting. Bungie basically has a completely open path that they can take going into the future when it comes to any kind of storytelling. We also had an actual finale mission that sent us back to the finale mission of Destiny 1, the Black Heart, reborn in a way, perhaps yet another clue as what we'll be fighting against in episode 1. The Vex did have a role this past season too, so it's not completely out of left field. They're trying to stop the connection with us and Crow as the Vex are working for the Witness, and this was kind of a last-ditch effort to cause a disruption. A nice way to send us off into final shape. Very nostalgic moment for those who have been with the franchise since the beginning. Gameplay. We got one activity split into multiple durations. Riven's Lair is the short and easier version. The coil is the longer and more difficult version. I'll be referencing the coil for the rest of this section. The coil is a series of 4 increasingly more difficult waves of rooms with a rotating cast of boss encounters. During a run, you're able to earn currency to spend at Riven in order to buy yourself different tiers of buffs depending on how much you spend and save. Otherwise, the gameplay of the activity was a platforming and traversal section, then a non-boss encounter, another platforming section, and then a boss encounter, with loot dropping after every boss in increasing amounts. A full run of the coil took about 30 to 50 minutes depending on your skill level. During traversal sections, you could break pots and jars to collect items for points for your overall score. And if you ended up collecting enough over the run, you would get a platinum score, opening up another room full of extra loot at the end of the run. I really enjoyed this activity. The increasing difficulty was awesome to make my builds actually feel valuable to have and effective, to the point where I did a lot of testing of builds within coil itself. The enemy density was good as well, enough stuff for people to kill and interact with. The loot was great, even dropping endgame materials like Ascendant Alloy, which tend to be in short supply. Encounter design was nothing too crazy, although it did at least go a little beyond just kill this boss lol. I also personally enjoy a longer session when it comes to seasonal content or just being in an activity. The less I need to worry about loading in and out of activities, the better. But there being an abridged version was also nice, although you could just leave after a boss kill if you wanted to, technically speaking. This feels like Bungie building on top of Deep Dive a little bit more, which I gave some high praise to, with the coil, in my opinion, being one of the best seasonal activities that we have ever gotten. The exotic mission was Star-Crossed, which I didn't have as high praise for. I thought it ended right as things really started to get rolling, or maybe it just felt like that because the final boss encounter was a bit weak, at least in comparison to other exotic mission bosses. Most of the experience up to the final boss I thought was pretty good though, but I think Avalon was probably the better mission. I wouldn't compare Season 22's Imbaru engine though, as the goals of these two missions were entirely different things. This season's weapons were also the best set of weapons that we got during the year, and might be in contention for one of the best sets of seasonal weapons ever, with 3 of them being in my top 5 for the year. Bungie does not appear to be slowing down the power creep of weapons, inching closer and closer to a potential ceiling of how strong we can reasonably get before having to invent new perks to keep people interested. Perk combinations have only been getting stronger, and even some things teased for Final Shape are still pushing these limits. Indebted Kindness, the rocket sidearm from Warlord's Ruin, the dungeon from this season, gained tons of popularity thanks to its ease of use, high damage, range, and perk selection, making it one of the premier weapons of the season, with another rocket sidearm on the way in Final Shape. The artifact for this season heavily featured Solar, with 5 different mods dedicated to it. Strand and Stasis had a couple of mods themselves, but nothing that I thought really moved the needle too much, especially after Bungie said that Stasis was going to get some more perks. I mean, technically they did, but not to the extent that I think people were really anticipating. Solar, on the other hand, got nearly every boost you could possibly imagine, giving even more life to a subclass that is already one of the best in the game right now. Kindling Trigger, Flint Striker, Heart of the Flame, Revitalizing Blast, Raise of Precision, not to mention Solo Operative returning to help out solo players finish off some of those solo dungeons. Speaking of dungeons, Warlord's Ruin released this season as part of the Lightfall Dungeon Pass. I thought Warlord's Ruin was pretty good overall. 3 encounters, each consisting of a unique boss encounter, although the first was kind of a pushover, with a fun puzzle mechanic thrown in there as well in between the first and second boss. I thought it was an enjoyable first playthrough, making the Lightfall Dungeon Pass a pretty solid experience as far as first-time playthroughs go, with Ghosts of the Deep being the other dungeon. The solo experience was a bit more grueling, also like Ghosts of the Deep, but maybe not as grueling as Ghosts, finding a better line between difficulty and time invested per boss kill. Buried Bloodline, the dungeon exotic weapon, started a bit slow in terms of finding a place in the meta, but I think is a very strong weapon. It has shined in Onslaught thanks to Anti-Barrier Sidearm this season. Sidearms again will be featured in the artifact next season. It's got a good place in some builds, it provides a strong effect, and really solid damage to boot. We also had The Dawning, Moments of Triumph, and Guardian games all returned this season. Not terribly different than previous seasons, we're just gonna leave it at that. While the Bungie layoffs didn't happen during the season, their effects were felt basically up until Into the Light, with community morale essentially at an all-time low. Then, Into the Light shows up and gives a massive shot of adrenaline to the community. New armor set, some of the best weapons the game has ever seen, new activity in Onslaught, a 50-wave horde mode with multiple difficulties and maps, the ability to tune your weapon drops to mostly what you're hunting, shiny versions of weapons with a special cosmetic effect and double perks, the return of the most overrated shader of all time in Super Black, and this was just in April. In May, we had Pantheon, a raid boss gauntlet that scaled in difficulty every week, dropping a bunch of raid loot and adepts if you were good enough, in addition to special emblems for clearing each week. We also got some new PvP maps for the first time in a while, although the PvP side of the game is still in some amount of disarray according to PvP players. I've spoken quite a lot about Into the Light already in previous videos, but this was one of the best updates that the game has ever gotten. Oh yeah, and it was free as well. All of this was going on while Bungie dropped teaser after teaser for Final Shape. All in all, a pretty good way to end the seasonal format as we move into a mostly unknown but what will likely end up feeling familiar episodic model, shifting from 4 updates a year now down to 3. I think Season 23 will go down as one of the better seasons that we got to experience during the year and during this format overall. Even if it didn't really shake things up too much like some people were anticipating, according to Bungie feedback last year, the seasonal activity was great, the weapons were good, the dungeon was good, and I hope players had a good amount of things to be happy with. It felt like Bungie actually got to do a little bit of experimenting this year, and it showed. So, here we are. It's a day before the Final Shape. A lot of people have asked me what I'm hoping for with Final Shape, and I haven't really figured out a good answer other than my usual, I hope it's good. But what I think it needs to have is an excellent story ending and campaign experience. I've expressed concerns in preview events about the difficulty of said campaign, gameplay, how I'm afraid it'll be too easy, how that might ruin some of the fun for me. But for others out there, I think the story matters a whole hell of a lot more, and I look to Lightfall as an example. Witch Queen's story and gameplay were both great, near universal praise, right? Lightfall gameplay, pretty close, on par with Witch Queen, kind of close, but the story, not well received. And that hurt Destiny in ways that I have not seen in a long time, even if the gameplay was solid. So not only does Final Shape have the pressure of being the finale of a super long story, but it also has the pressures of learning lessons from Lightfall. I think they learned the subclass lesson. Prismatic will be given to you very early on, and you will grow it during the campaign, unlike Strand, which was you give it and then you take it and then you give and then you take. I think people will find Cade a bit more palatable than Nimbus, perhaps another issue that is being addressed, as Cade feels like a return to D1 form, where I and others believe that he was at his best. So that's 2 kind of significant things right off the rip. Me personally, I know I'm going to keep playing. Bungie doesn't need to worry about keeping someone like myself, but they do need to worry about keeping casuals happy. Because if they don't enjoy the experience, if your more average player doesn't enjoy the campaign experience, then we may be going into a post-Final Shape world with considerably fewer people around. And that was already going to happen. People need to feel satisfied with the story experience. Your average player is probably caring about a memorable and satisfying story more than they are figuring out prismatic build crafting or how hard the campaign was. I know this isn't the craziest take in the world, but it doesn't make it any less true. If people leave happy, they will be more willing to return. If they don't leave happy, they will play the campaign, they'll talk crap about it on the internet, and probably say goodbye forever. There are a lot of people who will be saying goodbye forever, no matter how good the campaign is, and that's okay. Some people have been with this franchise for a decade. They're ready to call it quits. That's fine too. But there is still nothing like Destiny on the market. So if those people leave happy, they might be willing to make it more of a vacation than permanently quitting. These next couple of years are going to be interesting times. Episodes 1, 2, and 3 are going to last us for the next year. But in terms of anything after that, I mean, we are deep. We are deep in the unknown, like the most unknown that we've ever known. We've always known that more Destiny was coming up until now. You know, we knew 2 or 3 expansions ahead of time for the past few years. But the one question that I really want answered is unanswerable right now. What's next? I feel like recently there's been more and more speculation that Bungie might actually end up making a Destiny 3 down the road. And as much as it might have not made sense during the Light and Darkness saga, Destiny maybe only had the game is good again moment in the public eye with Witch Queen after launching both Destiny 1 and Destiny 2 to lukewarm at best response, and after countless negative articles about things that have happened in-game, warranted more often than not. It hasn't had that moment that I feel like some other games have had, like the Cyberpunk's finally good moment, No Man's Sky, Fallout 76. I'll date myself even more and say Final Fantasy 14 way back when. Destiny in the general gaming community still kind of considered a meme, and all people need as ammo is the DCV. The fact that it is impossible to play the game from start to finish. And as much as I might understand why the DCV needs to exist for the development part of the game, it's still one of the biggest factors as to why some people will not join the community or mock the game. A big old 3 on the box might solve some of those issues. Another chance for Bungie to tap into the general gaming community, a chance for people to dive into a fresh experience. You know, people who play Destiny are very committed to the game, but getting new players has been difficult. At least that's how it appears to someone with absolutely no data to back it up. But people might feel worried about Bungie's track record with Destiny and still might be apprehensive about joining up. Maybe Destiny 3 doesn't even solve that kind of an issue. It's probably a discussion a bit further down the road. So we'll need to see how Bungie navigates the next couple of years before I really have a lot more to offer on that. Until then, that's all I got. Here we go. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you in the final shape.